In this week's video, I want to provide a larger context for your readings for week 3 as you think about the legacy and history of slavery and how that relates to legal theory. So I kind of titled this, So What Does Race Have to Do with It? Largely because it's very difficult for many Americans to even talk about race. And also because of the way that critical race theory has been portrayed in social media and in news media, and will likely continue to be undermined to try to avoid this kind of reality of looking at the facts. And I want to use the example of Scott versus Sanford, which is your reading, largely because most people read that case most people don't read that case, I should say. And those who do seem to misunderstand somehow when they read it. And this kind of feeds into the belief or the myth that somehow racism is over, or we live in a post-racist society, and that bad things happened in history, but they no longer happen today. It's a convenient story for anyone who doesn't have to go through those injustices. It's obviously a lie if you look at it from the perspective of those who are harmed from that belief system. And I say this because social media in particular is a place that seems to produce very simple, easy to believe, but not very accurate views about the world. So we're going to talk about the fugitive slave law, police abuse today, and how that all ties into what's called white supremacy. Now, as you see in a recent poll, even though there's been quite a bit of opinion about critical race theory in the news media and on social media, most voters, most people who actually vote, which again is only like 40% of the total population, but of that group, most people basically don't care about critical race theory. It's not something that they are engaged in. Now that's its own problem if you think about it. But on the other hand, people who feel very strongly against it are the same people who don't know much about it. So you kind of have two groups that really aren't thinking critically, who are nonetheless criticizing something and one another really more than anything, of which they don't really have any knowledge about. So why is this important, I think, is what some people seem to be asking. One of the issues is that folks like Senator Ted Cruz, who has a lot of power, a lot of authority, he's one of only 100 senators, but he's pretty stereotypically repeating a lot of these misinformation about what critical race theory is. So I thought it would be nice to critically analyze Ted Cruz's positionality using critical race theory, so that perhaps someday he might learn more about himself. Contrary to what he seems to believe, critical race theory is not an educational theory. It's not a theory of the mind. It doesn't explain how you believe what you believe. And it isn't about alternative methods of teaching. Most of critical race theory comes from legal or law review articles and books. So I don't know how you would learn about it without reading. Obviously, also those studies and that research was done through examining facts and then writing about those facts. So it's science. So you would need math and writing skills to be able to do that. So what is the real issue here then if Ted Cruz and others' positions are not grounded in reality? Well, they're grounded in belief. And the first belief of white supremacy is that one culture, and what they're calling white culture, which I will maintain throughout this class, is an imaginary thing. It's a socially constructed thing. It's not It's not a real thing, right? It doesn't exist as like a rock or a tree or even a bird. It's something that people decide exists. And so what they've decided is that their culture and what their belief system is, and you can kind of see it in his picture, what he believes in, and what he's criticizing, so what he doesn't want, that's what he thinks is better, superior, and above everyone else's, and he wants to maintain that society. In other words, he wants to keep his power. But it's also a very strange belief, a mythological, supernatural, superstitious belief that culture, which wasn't real in the first place, is somehow related to something that is real, right? The melanin in your skin. There is no relationship between your skin color and your culture. There is a relationship in how people treat people differently based on what they see with their eyes and what colors they think are important or more important than others. And that is how culture and skin color are related. People with light skin, of which I am one, were not born into a certain culture. I was once told that I was a white man in a white man's world. Now, I think the person was just trying to make a point, but that's not a biological fact. Right? I wasn't born into the white world. I was born on planet Earth, I think like all of you, and socially, there are some white people or light-skinned people who think that they own the Earth. And so if the meaning is that I was born into that socially constructed belief system, sure, I agree. But simply being born with light skin does not give me domination or dominion over other people and over the earth. Again, some people believe that, and so their behavior is such that they demean anyone who questions what they believe in and question whether those in power should be in power. My grandma would call that hypocrisy or being a hypocrite. This behavior also limits critical analysis, basically saying not only can you not make any questions, you can't say why, you can't say how, you can't question Senator Cruz himself, even though he gets to question and criticize everyone else, but it's also because he's morally right. And you'll see this in even some professors who teach metaphysics and philosophy. They'll say that they know for a fact, it's a scientific fact, that God is real, and they go through this process of showing you that. But if you ask, well, don't you mean your God? Don't you mean that your idea of God? Then they'll actually demean you and undermine your criticism, even though you're asking a legitimate critical question. And this is the common tactic of white supremacy, is simply just to not let a debate happen. I find it incredibly ironic and hypocritical that these same people are complaining about quote-unquote cancel culture when this is exactly what they do all of the time. So I think it's kind of getting a spoonful of your own medicine, but at the same time it creates a larger problem, as we'll see. So much of this problem is a misunderstanding of the word theory. Obviously, when people who are not academics and not scientists use the word theory, I can't say what they mean by it, right? Just like I can't really say what they mean by most words. People say all sorts of things. I mean, just looking at social media language, for example, I mean, there's a whole lot of things I don't have any idea what those people are saying. You have to be in that social group and be participating in that language to understand what those phrases mean. Oftentimes, when I was a young man, we would use language that our parents couldn't understand, so the point was for other people not to know. But in academia, in college, in research, and in critical race theory, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean what you want it to mean. It means that there's a process, and the process is an explanation of facts. So you collect your facts, and then you explain those facts using theories that already exist. So for the case of critical race theory, it was following something called critical legal theory and legal positivism. Both of those theories are not being attacked. but for some reason, and I don't mean for some reason, I mean for racist reasons, critical race theory is being attacked. So what is it, right? Well, it's not one thing. And this is why a newspaper article, a TV show, or a social media post is not going to be able to explain what it is very well. If you're super interested in this topic, I would recommend what's called an annotated bibliography, which, as of 1993, which helps you understand this is not a new theory, even though people are making it seem like it is. By up to this point in 1993, here are the early writings that go back to the 60s, and sometimes a little bit before that. So there's lots of different writings you could look at, and this will give you an explanation of what those are. The two things that are important, though, about this process of thinking is that it came out of the 60s and looking at 150 years of failure. So even though politicians and academics and advocates kept saying equal opportunity, we're all equal, we weren't all equal. People were still not equal. So just saying it didn't really seem to matter. And then they said, well, not just the saying of it, but if you actually look at the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that came out of the Civil War, those also didn't make us equal. And then they said, well, what about the legislature? So they looked at all the laws, civil and voting rights legislation, and those also did not reduce the gaps in economic and educational success. So the laws didn't make any difference, or not much of a difference, and the language didn't make much of a difference. So what's left? Well, people are still being treated, right? The behavior is what's causing people to be treating unequal. And so you have to accept the idea that this is liberal legalism, right? This is the country we live in is built on these principles. So that must be the thing that is constituting identities that are not equal. Now, I've already told you this in a previous presentation, but that was the design. Remember, that was James Madison's design, was to ensure inequality. So I don't know where liberal legalism gets its idea about equality. I really don't. And when you ask people who believe in this, they give you really, really long, complicated answers that never tell you really much of anything. So if we go in, we say, well, why don't we just study the facts then? We're not going to sit here and debate opinions. So Derek Bell did research and studied a bunch of cases and political situations in which, when there is change, when reform does occur within liberal legalism, it occurs when white and black interests converge, when white people think that they are sharing an interest with non-white people. And that's not really a very aggressive claim if you think about it, right? I don't think that's going to shock anyone. But the same thing goes for Patricia Williams, who studied and found, again, looking at not just law cases, but also legal writings, right? So books, judicial opinions, and how courses were taught at law school, that positionality makes a big difference. I think, this is easily understood, I think, today as who gets followed when they go into a department store. That's your positionality, right? That's what people are seeing you as. This is how are you a legal subject that is free, or are you a legal subject that is surveyed? And so, again, this is not a shocking claim that we should be looking at positionality. That's a fact, right? So interests are a fact. Positionality is a fact. Kimberly Crenshaw studied economics, compared it to the law. I got to tell you, people who study law and economics are largely old white men. And so Kimberly Crenshaw noticed some things that they didn't notice, having never experienced her background. And so she pointed out that there was a consistent form of discrimination in capitalism because of its origins, that it was built on the slave trade practice. The slave trade practice was a hierarchy built on skin color. So how on earth was it supposed to not be? So again, people find this very uncomfortable. They accuse it of being Bolshevik or communist or Marxist. Maybe it is. I mean, who cares? It's a historical fact. It's you can't debate whether capitalism used slavery in order to make a profit. Today, that's still the case. You can study after study after study shows how capitalists use racial discrimination and gender discrimination to improve and increase their profits. These are facts. These are not opinions. So again, this might be uncomfortable, but again, it's not a shocking thing. Patricia Hill Collins, who studied a lot of older white males who were writing in sociology, found and showed that the fact is that that kind of knowledge, which again is not shocking, that white males produce white male knowledge. In other words, they produce studies that reflect, talk about, and describe white males. This is obviously building off of Patricia Williams. These things are not shocking again. So knowledge production, if it's mostly white males who are in power positions in politics, law, and education, then the knowledge is going to reflect them. That's not shocking. Difference and conformity. This was very intriguing studies that Beverly Tatum did with cafeterias, with classrooms, and seeing how differences between people are normalized, and how quickly groups are formed, and how this relates to trying to conform to what people believe is the right or appropriate behavior. And again, that reflects this kind of white male elitism. This is also very common sense. People behave differently in different settings. And so if one is dominated by white males, people will change their behavior. And then the last one I'll provide, there's many, many, many more, but the last study of facts was a very, very well documented book by Michelle Alexander, and others now have picked up this work, Paul Butler, and then the film The 13th, if you get a chance to watch that. I think it's on Netflix. Shows you that, after slavery was declared illegal, which was actually earlier in the 1800s, there was a process that then led to fugitive slave law, which we'll get into in a second, and that the ways in which the law made slavery illegal had more to do with importing slaves than it had to do with existing slaves. That then transitioned into Jim Crow after Civil War, which made it essentially illegal to be dark-skinned in certain places. And then after that, it made it the same thing, really essentially illegal to be dark-skinned in certain places. But then that gave you this concept of reasonable suspicion, that if you had dark skin and you were in a place that quote-unquote you shouldn't be, then you were subject to arrest. And then on the other hand, if you were dark-skinned and you were in a high-crime area, which would be in a dark-skinned community, that you are also subject to arrest. And so you see this process of racism, again, through the studies of facts. There are no opinions here. These are only facts. So if we look at the fact of fugitive slave law and how that led to policing, a subject that you can learn more from in your other classes, your policing classes, it's not a mystery, or it could be a secret in the sense that not a lot of people talk about it, but that there were white slave patrols. Right? There was a fugitive slave law, meaning that if a slave escaped, then it was the duty of these police to go capture and bring these slaves back to their owners, right? To the people who claimed ownership over them. This is exactly what happens in Scott versus Sanford, but he doesn't escape. He was given his freedom. And yet this was in debate, right? Largely because white supremacists didn't want this to be true, right? They don't want that to be a reality. And partially because not in every state. This wasn't true in every state, right? So some states, African could now become an American, and then in other states, Africans could not become Americans. They were still slaves. This is also brought up in the U.S. versus Morris case. Same situation where you have a lawyer who's free and is a lawyer, is helping in this rebellion or resistance to these white supremacist laws, and he's arrested, right? And so you see this kind of process of freedom versus control developing. This then comes to the Civil War amendments, and you see this in the 13th, 14th, 15th. There's some good movies that you can watch that describe that tension. And it's not just Southerners and Northerners. I mean, that's a convenient way of describing it, right? But it's human beings. It's people who, some believe that Africans should be citizens, and some believe that no, they should not. And so this also comes from the fear of the backlash. There was lots and lots of writing and a couple movies, even in the early 1900s, Birth of a Nation being the most disgusting example, the old movie from the 30s, shows this idea that somehow if enslaved people were free, that then they'd go become criminals, they'd do all these terrible things, and the whole country would be ruined. I mean, this is, really insane if you think about it from the point of view of, how bad things were for people who were living as slaves. So how could things get worse for those people? This is suddenly saying like equality would mean that everyone is doing poorly. Well, maybe there's some truth to that. I mean, maybe if you build a country or you build a society based on inequality, equality will require some inequality. But that's speculation, right? That's an opinion. That's not a fact. And so to be afraid of that, to be afraid of a opinion, is not a good reason to police former slaves. If we then, look through the rhetoric that comes out of this as early as the 1890s, you start to see politicians getting smart or clever about using phrases like unity and being tough on crime, and what they really mean is policing black bodies. And we see this all the way through Terry versus Ohio. If you look at this case carefully, this is saying that police have reasonable suspicion if they see a black man outside of a diamond store. Essentially, the point that the police officers were making is that they didn't see a lot of black people shopping in this area, and so therefore his mere presence was a threat to the white police, the white law-abiding citizens. We see this again in the concept of the thin blue line, where somehow police have become military, which has always been a bad idea. And there's obvious differences between the military and policing. And then this use of blue lives versus civilians, as if police officers weren't somehow citizen civilians, right? And so this further separation of saying who deserves to be a citizen and then who's excluded from that process. And then finally, this kind of leads to the, after Trayvon Martin's shooting, the Black Lives Matter movement against reforms. And this is where kind of critical race theory comes full circle. The criticism was in reaction to reforms not changing anything. And so Black Lives Matter was really about saying reforms are not going to be good enough anymore. There's going to have to be a complete restructuring of society in order for there to be equity, and that the language of equality has never mattered and it hasn't made any difference, and it's largely a smokescreen. So I say this because, what I found out over and over again is that students misread Scott versus Sanford. And what they really miss is that the Supreme Court, with the support of the majority of white voters and legislators, wrote into the Supreme Law. They wrote this as a legal opinion that's binding and has never been overturned. Africans were never intended to be citizens. So the 14th Amendment, by making citizenship tied to being born in the United States, doesn't overrule this statement. In other words, for white supremacists, this is the thing that they believe in. And this is when they say they want to make America great again, this is the America they want to go back to. And this is not a new thing, and it's a very old thing, right? From the beginning, from the 1600s, this has always been the case. Who should be included? versus the people who think some people should be excluded. And this is also leading to a misunderstanding of Brown versus Board of Education, which did not end segregation. It said that segregating schools was unconstitutional. Schools are more segregated today in most parts of the country than they were in the 1950s. And so simply having the Supreme Court say that something is against the Constitution, well, that's what they didn't do in the Scott versus Sanford case. So in either situation, whether they say it or they don't say it, right, the language of equality doesn't change people's behavior. And that's why we have to look at the actual doll studies themselves, because this is the structure of the conversation, where you'll find that kids, but not just kids, right, most Americans, labeling and stereotypes have an effect on the minds and language. So those labeling and stereotypes have a larger impact than what the Supreme Court says is constitutional. And part of this is, obvious, right? Not everybody reads Supreme Court cases. And so if they're getting like a summary of it, I mean, this last one about the Texas abortion law, for example, the Supreme Court didn't do anything. I mean, that's the underlying truth, that's the fact from a legal point of view. But there are tons of opinions about what that doing nothing means. And again, right, having fear and having opinions about opinions just isn't very useful to me, in my opinion. So this is the idea that we have to somehow move beyond all of these
Which
opinions.
doll is the black doll? And which one is the white doll?
That one.
Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? And which doll is the bad doll? And why is that doll pretty?
Because she's white and he has 2 eyes.
Which doll is the ugly doll? Why is that doll ugly?
Because he's black.
Which doll looks most like you?
Like me.
Yeah, which one looks like you?
And that one.
Okay.
That doll.
And the study of kids is important here, because what you're seeing is that kids are learning what the system, what society is putting out there. And they're learning it very quickly. It's because they have to, to survive, you have to learn what's going on around you. And so, again, what we're now producing is we're reproducing the same problems. That previous study, the doll study, was a reproduction of the study that was done in the 1940s and 50s. And so things are the same, because things are the same, right? The society hasn't changed, the structure hasn't changed, racism is still here, and so the outcomes are the same. That's the underwriting point of critical race theory, is that there is no such thing as consensus of equal opportunity. Just putting everybody into a room and saying, share your opinion, if you just look at social media on an average, regular basis, just like whatever the average is these days, I wouldn't even venture to say, is it 2 hours, 20 minutes, 5 hours? I don't know. You'll just see people saying these kind of these repetitious statements, and they're never wrong, right? You can't be wrong on social media because nobody's really right, because it's just everybody's opinion. Well, there's also really rarely ever any facts on social opinion, because facts don't do well in 4 words or less. Facts require a process, a scientific process. That's why papers and books are written, and those don't even tell you everything. And so, there's a lot of information that gets lost in this kind of back and forth. So what we've done is we've taken a very complicated thing about how racism works in society, and now we've just got people arguing at each other as if they were, yelling to themselves largely, right? And just saying, well, I believe what I believe. And so at the end of the day, right, is the idea is this, there's that consensus is just a myth, right? People don't have, there is no majority opinion. As you saw, there was no majority opinion as to whether people even know what critical race theory is, let alone have an opinion about something they don't know anything about. Again, it's very shocking to me and hypocritical that people have an opinion about something they don't know anything about. But this really goes with the idea of liberal legalism, which is, let the free market sort it out, let the majority share their opinion. Everybody should be entitled to equal individual rights, and the government shouldn't get involved. Well, all of those ideas, liberal legalism has shown us that for 300 years, that the power stays in the powerful, and those who don't have any power suffer injustice. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. And that's a fact that is easy to see in New York City. And so that's all critical race theory was saying, is that the power group, which is largely white men, maintain power. Just look at who's on the United States Senate, who's the majority. Right? Look at who's on the United States Supreme Court, who's the majority. Look at who's in the Fortune 500 companies' CEOs, who's the majority, right? You could just keep going through this list. So it's not shocking to point this out. So I'll end with this idea, right? I think some of you are probably saying, so then why are people so afraid of critical race theory? Well, one argument that has been put forward is based on looking at the census, both from 2020 and then if you go back to 10 years before that, 2010. The demographics, the percentages are changing in the United States, whereas there's a smaller share of the white population. Now, I don't think, some liberals get very excited about this and they think the world's going to change because suddenly there's going to be a no majority population. That's still a belief and consensus. So critical race theorists would say, no, that's naive, right? Because the rich, powerful people are still going to have their power no matter what the percentages are for the majority of the population. But for a lot of white folks, especially poorer white folks and middle-class white folks, they perceive that one of the reasons why, let's say inflation is happening, or they lose their job at the factory, or Walmart comes in and replaces small mom and pop shops in their neighborhood, is because of the threats to traditional American values. And if we all thought about this for a while, we could sort it out. But again, that's not what's going on. People are going on to social media or they're going on to the news, and it just gets reduced to one sentence and everybody's yelling at each other. And so to try to sort all of this complicated mess out really requires essentially an education of some sort. You have to critically reflect on your own positionality. You have to think about other people, which it seems to be harder and harder for people to do these days. And you have to see how the structure, how the system is reproducing these identities. And that's really where we're at now in this class, is you're seeing now this is the structure, this is what the legal system does. And so now we want to analyze, how does this relate to you individually, and then how does this relate to social groups, especially when we think about labeling and crime, and we think about what kind of reform or what kind of social change would be necessary.